Hey Lance, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Very good. Thanks for everybody for coming through and watching. I'm also trying to go live on IGTV at the same time. First time I try that. So Lance, I always start the show by talking about how I met the person on. So we met through TEDx, which is super cool. Great experience. I remember, and I posted this earlier today. I remember going to the rehearsals, and you were talking about like what you do, and I was like, oh my god, I gotta be on stage with this guy. Like so, and then I remember, we'll talk about that later. But you were involved in, I guess, tell people what you do. Tell people what you do.
Yeah. So I'm. I mean, I guess I'm a combo. I'm obviously a CEO because I run my own company, but I'm kind of a hacker for the government a little bit, right? So and obviously commerce as well. So I help government and commercial, but I actually hack hackers. That's what I do. So like my job is to do what they would consider called counterintelligence, but like on the online world, cyber counterintelligence, where it is the protection of spies trying to get information back out of the U.S. and things like that. So when you see things like the DNC hack that happened in 2016, things like that, that's where I kind of come in a little bit. Is understanding that kind of world of like what the Russians are doing, what maybe Iran might be doing in their cyber operations. And then I also we even solve normal cases. The company I own is called Unit 221B on purpose because it's named after Sherlock Holmes, and I do a lot of work with law enforcement as well on criminal cases. Even ranging from I go from one end to ranging from like tracking down spies and hunting down spies all the way to homicide investigations in some weird ways. So yeah, but yeah, my world is basically hacking back or utilizing my skills to protect others from people foreign entities hacking in and whether it's targeting financial or government secrets or influencing our election. That's kind of where I come in.
So you used to work for the government, and then you went off and started your own company, right? Like, talk about.
Well, it's a more complicated. So I've never really worked for the government. I've always started companies, so I've owned a few companies, right? And my first company was a company that worked with the government, right? It was called Secure Science. And so customers like the Pentagon, the FBI, CIA, things like that were my customers. I like my freedom a little bit. There's nothing to say about the government. I respect them, but the salaries are bigger on this side.
You knew an hour. That's all. Yeah.
Right, but I've embedded myself. There's kind of a joke at the bureau that I'm kind of an extension to the FBI, right? So, but essentially, I've built companies that help and enhance their technology abilities, capabilities, and things like that. Or I'll do in the early days, my first company, I kind of mastered the hackers, but then I needed to get to know law enforcement and lawyers and things about how can we do this in a progressive way that's legal, not invading anybody's privacy. And so I kind of got embedded into the government because essentially I needed to understand how to do this right without breaking any laws myself. And so my clients were mostly government and banks at that time. And that was actually advantageous because then you get the banking side. And when they were, back in the early days of 2000s, we'd get all this, the attacks on banks, phishing, and remember all the fake Bank of America accounts and all that stuff. So you get to kind of see both sides of it, where it's what's law enforcement and the IC doing about it. And then in 2006, we also got into what's called advanced persistent threats, where it's spies with hacking tools, essentially. And, I did work with the Pentagon and stuff like that. So look at it as more I guess, a consultant to the government. I've never actually been a government class official or anything. So
That's even better. That's even cooler to me.
Yeah.
Entrepreneur, to know that you can start it. I thought you had to only go at a company, create a company like that if you came in from working in the government. The fact that you were able to do it without that, it's pretty cool.
Well, actually, what's really neat is the story of how that actually started for me was in 2002 or 3. I was already in a group that was a research group. It was actually an academic group, but it was funded by a three-letter agency tracking terrorists that use spam as secret messages. Like basically everybody gets a million messages. What are you going to do with it? Delete it, right? Spam. But maybe there are people that are using that because everybody's deleting it to communicate quietly with each other. And so this was a bunch of PhDs, and I got pulled into it because I was I was doing cryptography at the time and had my own open source project. And then later on, when I fishing kind of PH got around a little bit, I kind of made a name for myself, tracking using the same techniques of tracking the terrorists down to like tracking fishers down. And there was this big blow up of article. Actually, it's kind of how I started my first company. Was this big article, And what happened was, then a hacker buddy of mine from a conference that I would attend to, he introduced me to the government and said, you guys should meet. This guy's like really getting into this stuff. And then, you still got to go some same processes, background checks and all the clearance stuff and things like that. But like essentially, we have what's called blue badges and green badges, right? So you're either inside or outside, right? And so it's just more like, almost look like a contractor. And so our company was more like a contractor. But I just preferred the freedom. And I think they did too. It was a good mutual relationship because I could tinker and creative and go, hey, what do you guys think of this really crazy idea? And then they'd be like, let's talk to our lawyers, and then we'd figure out how to make it work. So,
And I know you also work with kids in communities of color
yes.
and different stuff like that. I remember we just met each other. We just saw each other again at a conference that Aaron threw, and you were telling me two things I remember about the conversation we had. One was nonprofits were being hacked at the time for some reason, and you were saying that they were being held for ransom. Their data was being held for like ridiculous amounts of money, and you were helping these nonprofits to not have to pay it. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it was a homeless shelter. So I got introduced to a Canadian homeless shelter. So I'm dual citizenship. I'm actually Canadian and American, right? And so so I got a call about a homeless shelter that got hit, and they do like fundraising for the homeless and all of this stuff, and I think they also have shelters. It was put together by an Anglican or Catholic priest years ago, and he passed on now. But it kind of was like, who hits a homeless shelter? That's just really, really mean.
For these people, like
yeah, exactly. So I actually spent. I kind of got invested in it, and so I looked at it, and they were in a hurry. They ended up paying the ransom because they were in a hurry, and we didn't, this was like, we didn't have, this figuring this out would have taken a while, and there's this balance of cost, right? And that's the hard part about dealing with ransomware on the good side is like we want to try to stay within their economic limits so that they don't feel like paying the ransom's a better deal, right? Because we obviously want to discourage that, but sometimes people just don't have a choice, right? And I'm going to give a little definition of ransomware so people understand a little bit of it. So it's just a piece of software. It's a malicious piece of software that designs to secretly go in and encrypt all your files, including your backups and all that stuff in many cases if the backups aren't offline. And what it'll do is then it'll pop up with a ransom note and say, all your files are encrypted, pay us 2 Bitcoin, which can be like, per key. And sometimes that's what they've been doing is they actually encrypt a bunch of different servers. So each server costs money. So on average, like, I've seen big enterprises have to pay like millions of dollars to like, it's starting at around $20,000 to $50,000 for each, computer. But a mid-sized company or a homeless shelters, they got to fish out this. And so what happens a lot of times is insurance will cover it, right? Like running a business and you get insurance, right? But either way, there's downtime, there's this super massive cost to it, there's embarrassment. You're seeing new ransomware that actually will also leak your stuff on the internet if you don't pay, right? Yeah, so like if you have private information, they'll purposely leak it out if you don't respond to them, right? And so that's kind of a new trend. So I took the ransomware and I figured out what kind it was, and I actually spent like a month researching it outside of just the homeless shelter, but it's what motivated me. I was like, oh, don't mess with the homeless, man. And so I ended up cracking the ransomware encryption. And so now I have a service that I provide where I can, like I've told all the major ransomware like brokers out there, the people that actually like deal with like, all right, we're going to have to talk to the bad guy. And instead they come to us and say, oh, this variant, which covers like a few, he cracked. And so now they can come to us at a much, cheaper, perspective. And us, plus we walk them through all the restore and how to deal with this and how to protect themselves afterwards. And so, and insurance will cover us, for them and stuff. So it's not like this big out of pocket problem where it's paying a criminal, not knowing if their software is even going to decrypt, because actually in this case, we've had a few clients where the bad guys' decryption software, when you buy the tool, doesn't work completely. It won't decrypt all of the files. And you can't go to the bad guy and say, you know what, I have a review that I would like to put on Yelp and say, hey, can you get better at writing your software?
I really need this file. Can you help me out?
Right, exactly right. So, and it's actually bugs in their own software. So it's like I have to write versions that fix their bugs for them, these bad guys, so that people can fully restore. So essentially, I've been spending some time helping people with that, working also with law enforcement on cases like that as well. But a lot of times, it's nonprofits or small businesses and stuff like that, or medium-sized businesses, and that's the worst impact right now, especially during COVID, right? Businesses are trying to stay afloat. It's hard right now already. And so I've actually put out a lot of my services for a massive discount on purpose, so that we're and we've actually even had sponsors support us from an infrastructure perspective of, if you guys need free infrastructure because of they're hacking a hospital, it's all free for you so that we can get the hospital back up, because obviously with COVID, and that's a common attack,
Right now?
So that's a very common attack, is ransomware goes after hospitals because they're an easy target. Unfortunately, they use what's called legacy software, so the security is not and they're kind of stuck to we have to use the software, and so it's hard to really manage its security on a health company, and they're all very different, right? And so in cases like that, yes, there are hospitals and medical companies that are getting hit. There was a funny thing where some of the ransomware bad guys actually wrote and put a post out saying, we're during COVID-19 we're not going to hit hospitals, but they still do it. So
We're not at the hospital during COVID.
Yeah.
I remember that conversation. I don't remember what women from that conversation oh my God, we are fucked. If right now that's the way people, and this was before the economy and all that. This was 3 months ago, 4 months ago, right?
Yep.
So then we also had a very interesting conversation about, the stuff that I do in the Bronx and stuff that you're doing with kids. Can you tell people what you do with the kids?
Yeah, so there's a few different things I do, and when I say kids, some of them range into still adolescent, guidance as well. So psychology, the child development states that you're still an adolescent until you're 25, right? And so there are a few things I do, and one of them is I work both with kids and the mentally ill, and so I kind of work with some non-functional adults that have been having struggles, and then I do these things, and I'll get to that in a sec, but I'll focus on the kids first. So with the kids, I've done a lot of work where in the Bronx, actually, a while back there was a Bronx school that I was working with where I was working at Deloitte at the time, and they had what's called Impact Day, where you take a day and you go do something good for the community. And I did this, personal branding talk to these kids, and it was, they're all prepping for school and for college and stuff, right, or how to do it. And it was a kind of a funny story, because this is this was not, this is a Bronx school. There's cops in the hallways. That's, this isn't and so I'm looking at the PowerPoint that Deloitte gave me, and it was Pepsi and Starbucks, and I'm decided to go off script. So I wore a cane, a top hat, because they forced me to wear a suit. So I was I'm going to rock a cane, I'm going to rock a top hat with this and have my earrings out. And then when we actually talked about personal brand, I actually brought, because I'm a musician, and I brought up imitations of Lil Wayne's sound, or Akon, when they'd say convict, and I would talk about how that's an imprint into that first impression. That's your watermark, that's your first brand. And it was funny, because then the principal was what is this guy? He's got them paying attention for an hour. We can't even get our teachers to do that. Can we keep him? So I ended up working with this school to start a music program, actually. So I do also some computer stuff, but this one was actually fun for me, because I was going in and doing the normal career talks and stuff like that. And I'll be honest, ninth and 10th grade is much harder than 11th and 12th. You have the kids where they won't sit down, and But it was fun because then I ended up talking to the principal just out of like a good conversation, and she said they had no music program, and I said, well, they do now. And they had a grand piano, so I put together an a cappella group because she said a lot of the kids like to sing in the hallways and like do like little a cappella stuff together. So I put together kind of like a program that actually, for free and stuff after school that would like allow them to like, pick some songs, obviously regulated based on what's allowed at school and stuff, but like, let's do some a cappella pieces and things like that. And then it ended up working out and became a school program and paid for it and supported at some point, right? And so that kind of extended that, because I believe in the arts in schools. Like they've done studies on proving that if children study the arts, even if they're not like dedicated to it like later in their life, that it actually builds motor skills in certain areas in the brain that are actually really useful for success. It teaches discipline, right? It teaches good reward systems, practice. You get there, you actually have to put in the work, right? And so, but you feel it, and there's a reward to it because there's an internalness to music. So that was one aspect. And then the other stuff I'm doing a lot right now is I'm using coding to help, misguided kids, and some of them are hackers where they got in trouble, right? And we've actually worked with law enforcement a bit to help build this program internally as well. So some of the kids that maybe get arrested, instead of us throw them into jail, right? Because a lot of it's bad homes. It's hacking today is for attention, right? Like, so if these kids are hanging in a group that's hacking and they're doing malicious stuff, it's not that they're growing up evil. It's that they're misguided, and maybe there's something going on in home or things like that, And we found
families these kids end up having, right? So yeah,
right.
About this, and I have a friend that actually went to jail for hacking, which is crazy, And it's like, I mean, I understand this damage, this value to the damage you do, but it shows a skill set and just a missing link that person could be very special.
And it's hard because computers, you can't connect the same way you can with someone in person, right? And when you're on a computer, it's easy to disassociate, not realize that's someone else's computer, or that can cause millions of dollars of harm. And I remember being a teenager and slightly mischievous myself just for attention, changed grades for money. I totally did that, and like, but to me, I was just trying to be the cool kid, like, look, I've got a magic trick, like me, and that's what it really comes to is, I don't mean to compare it to gang violence because gangs are different, right? It's a very different world, but like, in a way, hacking groups are gangs, right? And they are kind of supportive of each other, and they end up supporting bad behavior, but they're loyal to each other, and they do this, and they don't realize the trouble they're going in. Same with like young kids in gangs. It's similar in the sense that they haven't grown up yet. So but all they want is protection, and they want to feel accepted for once. And if you look at the family lives and a lot of the kids now with back in the gang stuff, there were similar issues. And the same goes with hacking, where 9 out of 10 of the families, bad situation or abuse is going on, or they're just trying to get away from it and it's an escape, right? So we work, I work a lot with kids that are, misguided, and then I do kind of like this Jedi hacking training, but with the guidance of psychologists, with therapy, things like that. So they have to earn that with it, so that they also learn self-acceptance. They feel like they can start growing together. They do therapy, things like that. My wife is actually, working on her PhD in neuroscience and psychology, and studies like some of the behavioral problems and addictions that we end up having and choices that we make at like a very granular, crazy mathematical level. But it's been helpful. And then on the other side, the mental health thing that I really like doing as well is, and a lot of the kids, obviously, there's mental health issues there, so I apply that, but I apply it mostly with guidance with therapy and, professionals there. And then on the other side of it, it's I use programming to help with getting kind of like a routine. So if someone's like depressed, or they're bipolar, or this or this, and they just can't seem to be functional, like I had a kid who was like, he had PTSD from getting jumped. He's not kid, but like he's a kid, and like he got jumped on the subway in New York, and so he got a fear of like even going to work, and all this stuff, and so he was like drinking a lot and just kind of self-destructing. And I saw him on Facebook and just kind of saying some, I'd say suicidal-ish, comments. So I I checked with my friend who happened to be the mutual friend and was like, all right, what's the story here? And then I just reached out and I said, hey man, I'm a musician too. I see you're a musician. Like, we should meet up. Like, and da da da. And so I Ubered him like to a dinner that we were having. I said, you don't even have to worry about getting on the subway, man. Just come with us and like hang out. And then I put him on like what I call Python for PTSD, which is Python's a computer language. And what I would do is I said, okay, we're going to get you structure, because he ended up losing his job because of the trauma, right? And I kind of saw that coming. And so I said, all right, we're going to act like this is the Marine Corps and you have a job. No Facebook from 9 to 5, because that's the wrong way to get your reward and dopamine. You're not going to actually get that. You're going to only seek out the attention there. So we're going to change that. 9 to 5, I'm your boss. You're going to be doing these things. You're going to learn Python and you're going to do these tasks, right? And so every single day, what's really cool about learning a computer language is it's not biased. It's just telling you whether you did it right or wrong, and you can choose to try to keep figuring it out until you get it right, right? And so what it does is it builds a self-esteem, it builds a confidence in you, because you're like, I did that. And what is cool is it's all iterative. By learning, you take away the mountain that when you're depressed or you're non-functional, you can't see in front of you. So what I do is like there's a concept in engineering we call agile. And so what I did was I changed the concept of agile software development to agile lifestyle development. And what I do is it's basically these sprints where we take a mountain that they're scared of, we break it down into these small things, and they just start working on that, and they get to cross it off. And by the way, crossing off that task is important for the brain, right? It makes them feel good, and they're like, oh my God, I can accomplish this. And guess what? It's like a snowball. After a while, they're like moving faster and faster, and their life is coming back together because they taught themselves that they can do it. And it's when you're in a fog of depression or a fog of like trauma, it's hard to see that. So you just almost need a coach. So I play the coach, where I'll check in with a few people every morning. Like in Agile, we have what's called stand-ups. So it's 5-minute check-ins. What'd you do yesterday? What'd you do today? And do you have any blockers or obstacles or anything bothering you? I've added to that, how are you feeling? Despite your feelings, what are you going to choose to be today? Am I going to be present or focused, this and that? Because our feelings are one thing, but we let them have way too much credit. But if we choose, despite our feelings, that, I feel this way, but I'm going to still try to be focused. I'm going to try to be present, and I'm going to set this. And then what 3 things are you grateful for? This changes the outlook and the psychology of the mind, so that over time you start, like, if you are depressed, you have to actually look for the silver linings. And over a while, your brain will get into a habit of that, right? Some of them I have doing meditation because it works for them, and they're binded to it. I'm not a pusher on that. But like, some of like, hey, non-reactivity comes there, right? You teach that, and there's a lot of good studies and scientific studies on how it can help you kind of just not react to every single thing. With everything that's overwhelming us, we've got Facebook, we have, phones, we have all these things coming at us. That only adds to a non-functioning person's problems at that point, right? So what I just check in with these people every day, and I have like a whole kind of setup. And sometimes I use a ticketing system similar to software engineering, and literally say, here's your task sets, here's this and that, and you will not believe the productivity. And once they feel productive, I'm telling you, structure, I'm not a therapist, right? But structure can change a human being so much that they're like, I can do this. I'm going to keep doing this. And you can watch. And I've literally watched one guy who couldn't see his kids, right? Go from that to now seeing her constantly. You know what I mean? And he had anger issues, and he was open about it and admitted it. And I was like, all right, we're going to meditate that. That'll help you with non-reactivity. We're going to start seeing the world in a different light. But we also did these other things. We did check-ins. We did tasks. We did, okay, now you're going to try to get a job. You're ready to get a job now. These things were all set up,
He didn't know anything about code before he joined the program, and then he was able to get a job.
Yeah. So, but see, that's an interesting thing, is almost so Steve Jobs said this, I think, best in the 90s in an interview, and actually I think it's still on Netflix. It was before, when he left Apple, but when he was at Next and before he came back. And he said, every human being should at least try to code once, because it changes the way you think about things, right?
100,000%. I say the same thing. Whether you're going to choose to do it or not, just understanding how it works, helps you to evaluate things very differently.
Yep.
It's crazy.
Yep. And it plays into your logic, right? It pulls out your logic. So you're not flooded with emotions all the time, right? So
it's logic. If this happens, all right, here are the options. I'm going to make you do this, right?
Yep.
I agree. And I truly commend you for what you're doing, man. That's awesome. We may need to connect you with some of the kids in Meta Bronx.
Perfect.
And then this summer, hopefully, we're trying to get the summer youth program to do more remote because they canceled summer youth this summer.
I have an entire environment for this. This would be great. So we should definitely talk later about that. Yeah, perfect. So I just met a company that's doing virtual training grounds, and they have it all inside. So it's not difficult to set up. It's all in the web browser, which is like, usually the problem with all those virtuals, you got to set this up and then you got to do this, and they've come up with a really cool way, and they're a brand new company, so they're still finishing up development, but I'm keeping an eye on them for that, so we should definitely talk about that. So yeah.
Definitely. So what would you tell? All right, so this is the entrepreneur hour. So one of the things, I've had other cybersecurity people. What would you tell people about right now? The one opportunity, but also they should be looking at to protect themselves in this environment, right? Like everybody's home. I'm sure actors are having a field day. Like, what would you say are some things that people should be looking out for?
So I'm gonna cover two things, and I'm gonna call my wife out. But we recovered it, but it happened even to the best of us. My wife lives with a security guy, and trust me, she's surrounded by security people constantly, right? She got frauded, actually, within probably a few weeks of the pandemic starting, right? Everybody's going through a massive anxiety. This is an existential crisis in action. This is, holy crap, are we gonna die, right? Like, let's just clear the air. If y'all haven't had your anxiety attack yet, it will come, and that's okay. Like, and I've had mine. And I honestly did. I had that like psychotic break of like, oh my God, I'm detached from everything, right? And so this is a hard time right now, and it is crisis, and people are scared, and now people are fighting and protesting, jobs are getting lost, and there's a lot to be scared about, right? But there's also a lot of good things. There are silver linings in the situation that's going on here, right? Obviously, we've seen the climate is cleaning up a little bit, a few other things that are, happening. And it might teach us later on to slow down a little bit, right? I always like to say, go slow in a hurry, right? It's a Wyatt Earp quote, right? So there's some things to look out for. Is like, my wife got frauded, right? She was, when you're dealing with online right now, say you're a smoker or this or that, well, even though online cigarettes are illegal, and you can't go to the store, you're going to probably look for like, hey, how do I get my cigarettes or this and that? And you're going to make a mistake. There's a likely chance that you'll make a mistake because you're just going to be like, I need to get them because...
What is a mistake, though? What is a mistake? Clicking the wrong link? What is the...
Well, in this case, it was going to the wrong thing without checking who the retailer was, right? Like, are they legitimate? Things like that. For instance, I'm using cigarettes as a great example because it's technically illegal to buy cigarettes online in the U.S., and most people do not know that. And I want to use that on purpose because there's a lack of knowledge with the change that's happened to us. We don't know all the laws, and it doesn't make us bad, right? So when you go online, how do you know this site is legitimate, this site is a seller that you're going to deal with? Because right now, what's coming out of the woodwork is people trying to, sell you stuff more because they're out of jobs.
Yep.
And you won't have, because, they've been proven that there's less murders going on because even the bad guys in that way are scared to go outside. But what it will increase is COVID donation scams. Right? We're seeing a ton of that. We've seen an increase, obviously, in ransomware. So if you are a business, start backing up but putting it off-site, right?
Is that stuff like Dropbox or...
Dropbox will actually save you. If you put everything in Dropbox, it's got revisioning. So, even if they encrypt, you could always go back to the last, revision, right? I recommend that to everybody that's, smaller business. Use a cloud service that has revisioning so that even if you get hit, that's the worst case you got to do is set up your OS CD and, not CD, but, disk or whatever and go back to that and then just get all your files back, right? And revision it. But there's a lot of fraud going on. There's a lot of scams. So when you and I are an Instagram users, so those ads are getting better and better, right? You're just like, oh, I want that. Oh, that's cool. All right, I want that, right? I saw one the other day that was the Yoda mechanical one, and it doesn't actually say that they actually created the Yoda mechanical thing, but it talks about the guy from the Mythbusters that built one, and it shows a picture of that. But then I look at the domain, and it's like xyzjbq.com, right? And I'm like, am I going to put my credit card number in that site? Yeah. Now, that's the problem with Instagram ads, is anybody can get up there and do that. I'm not saying every Instagram is bad, right? But it takes that extra step that you need to look at, and there are sites that you can go, and even for the non-technical person, there are like browser plugins that can check the age of a domain, If a domain is brand new, and this is the problem we're seeing with, like, say, COVID fraud, is that there are a lot of new COVID legit sites coming out, but at the same time, one of the tricks for detecting fraud is a domain new, right? Was it registered a few days ago and suddenly popped up online? And that's one of the techniques we use, but now it's becoming hard to tell what's real and what's not, right? So that's a big issue, is where you get Instagram ads. You need to look at the site. Maybe don't rush just because we're bored to put in and get some toys and things like that right now. It doesn't mean don't consume. I'm not saying don't consume, but I'm just saying take the,
processors. Is it better to use a PayPal right now versus a card?
well, PayPal can be hooked into almost anything, but the good news about PayPal is if you get frauded, they can get your money back, right? So if they do say, oh, well, we did allow PayPal to go through that, they usually pay back. So, for instance, when my wife got frauded, PayPal paid the money back, right? And so, and your banks will too. So don't stress. Like, you can actually just tell your bank, I got scammed. Oh my gosh! And most banks, if you're a personal, account, will get you your money back, like within like 10 days, right?
You worry then that the card is on file, on.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot there that's bad, right? Secondly, don't spend too much. And what I mean by that is, if you do buy a toy, right, you lose $50. It's not a big deal. But, like, now's not the time to spend $5,000 on something that you've never actually, like, spent money with that merchant before, right? This is where, like, Amazons, and I know some people don't like Amazon, I get it, but, like, Amazons of the world, wherever those main shop, retailers are, it's better to see if they have the same exact toy you might want from the Instagram ad on there, because what Amazon and other companies do is they protect you the liability. If it does not happen, they'll cover you for that and get you your money back, right? So that kind of plays a buffer. So, like, Google, PayPal, all of these things do help you protect yourself. It's what you call like a chargeback, where, like, you have chargeback protection. If your credit card gets hit and you didn't pay for it, you tell them, I want to, charge back, put it back on my card, things like that. And most of those services will do it, even if it's fraud. Now, there's also another thing that I want to bring up is news, right? So information is coming at us a mile a second, right? And I mean, it's ridiculous. And guess what? It's going to get us down very quickly emotionally. Now, a lot of the fraudsters, a lot of the tricks that go on, it's all psychological more than it's technical. Most fraudsters don't need super technical stuff. You look at what's called, like, Nigerian 419 scams, they just use email and, like, some kind of, like, Bitcoin or PayPal account, right? Like, that's their technology, right?
They'll get one out of every 5,000 people. Yeah.
And that's all they need, right? And so, and the same as this, and I'm not dissing any news sources, right? A lot of people have opinions about Fox, CNN, the different ones, things like that. They've all gotten very opinionated. I think we can all agree to that, right? COVID has also become a political issue, right? And, it's sad to see, but this is part of what I talked about at TED. It's the breakdown of this, and there are foreign entities that want us to feel like it's all chaos, right?
Yeah.
And we need to be mindful of that. For instance, I had a conversation with someone on Facebook, and they were like, they were saying something bad about a political person that they thought, but it was not like an opinion, it was an allegation, right? And you know how some of the mudslinging goes around and things like that, right? But this was a serious allegation, and I'm like, can you provide evidence, And they were like, they wouldn't do it. And I said, something's going on. Your limbic system, which is your emotional state, is going, but you're not giving me one prefrontal cortex answer. So it's a friend of mine, so I sidelined him. I'm like, you okay? And he was worried about his family and some other things. I said, all right, let's talk about that. Let's not turn it into politics. Let's not, come at each other about this. It'll only infectiously do it. I said, I personally don't care who you vote for, but the response you're having is only affecting your beliefs, not your actual, logic, right? Yeah. And the news is going to do that because we're afraid right now. We're looking at our future and what I call patting the hen house. So if our family, like, say, one of our parents or something has to go get a COVID test, that's going to take about a week, and it's scary. It's a scary feeling. So what's going to happen is we're going to try to protect our future, protect our kids, protect this. And we are going to naturally lean towards any of that feeling of protection because it's based around fear, right? When you have anxiety and fear, we need to protect our families and natural response, but it is exploitable, right? So the news is actually very much exploiting it. Let me give an example. I don't know what the exact numbers are now, but as we see these big numbers in COVID rise in America, which, they're big, But if you actually do the numbers, it's 0.15% of Americans that actually have COVID, like 0.15. That's like, and it's only 0.5 people who have actually died in America, right? So what happens is the news highlights these big numbers, but doesn't do the proper math. It doesn't mean that it's not a pandemic. It doesn't mean that either. But what I'm saying is, you got to look at all the math. You got to look at, like, step back and not, like, just read a headline and, like, react and get scared. You got to realize that right now there's money in clicks, and so when we're scared, we're going to click more and click more and click more and click more and click more. And even the most honest, mainstream providers out there have moments that, they're incentivized for you to click.
No doubt.
Right? We're all human. We're all human. So that can affect your judgment in very quickly, and it can like, being on quarantine is hard for everybody. So the part about it is that if you haven't had your anxiety attack, which is going to make you that's going to put you in that most vulnerable state. It's like about a 2 to 3 week state where it kind of kicks in, and you've got family, or you got something that's going to, like, happen, or you got rent to pay, or all of these things that are going to happen. There's going to be that moment. But in that time, if you're looking at the news, and 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 you can't put down your phone, it's not a normal, typical security vulnerability, but it is a security vulnerability there, because your mind is getting actually hacked up, and in a weird way, it's a self-destructive cycle that's going on, and so, and I know we probably expected to talk more about technical, but a lot of the work I do in counterintelligence is not only online, but it's psychological, right? And so, like, you have to. They attack they call a thing in technology, they have 7 layers of the network layer, right? And then there's a joke that's called the layer 8, which is the human, and that's what you attack. And today, that's what people are attacking, is the actual human, the mind, the habits of clicking quickly, the habits of, like, believing something very quickly, the habits that we're under, we're in a fear state right now, and we're gonna, be using our limbic system more often just to survive than our prefrontal cortex. Right, and so the news is something to be very careful of. Be mindful of how often you check it. Be mindful of, like, I hate to say it, but, like, one of the best security practices is, like, the silver lining about quarantine is if you got family and you're with them, you get more time to spend with them, whether they drive you crazy or it's great. But, it's some of the best defenses, like putting the phone down for, like, a few hours, letting your dopamine kind of actually drop down a little bit, because during these times when your dopamine's up and stuff, it will deplete, and it'll go faster and faster and faster, and this is when fraudsters come in, and this is when you're more susceptible to these types of attacks. So I didn't want to just do a technical, like, talk here. I wanted to also say that, like, look, the actual environment right now is affecting how we're thinking about and approaching problems, and my wife is a very smart cookie. She's getting her PhD. But we're all susceptible to it because we're scared. And that's one of the best fraud maneuvers ever, is the fear, right? And it plays on it. So
this makes me think about one of the things I thought about you immediately when the 5G stuff, all these conspiracy theories. What can you tell us about that? Because I'm always telling people, dude, that's from Russia.
That's from Russia. It is from Russia. It is from Russia. I can even give you the first article later of when it started, down to that letter.
Russia.
Yeah, it's Russia. It is Russia.
Yeah, I knew it.
Yep. And so, and that's the thing is, like, the challenge we have with, like, conspiracy, none of this is tangible. It's hard to go, what's true, what's not, right? Blah, blah, blah. And not all of it as a technical solution. There's advancements in machine learning that are pretty cool, but, like, humans, if you're coding, are biased. So, like, how do you train non-biasness, right? It's a tough problem. But yeah, the 5G is straight out BS, right? Just, like, the way to rationalize it is this. And I know a lot of us are not big fans of big corps, and, there's trust problems there and things like that. But there's a group called the FCC, Federal Communications Commission, that has to actually approve that, and they actually work with the FDA on matters such as radio waves and frequencies and the strength of them, because it all plays into radiology, right, which can affect human beings, right? There is no chance in the world that it would even be marketed or talked about right now if it didn't pass muster for safety checks for that. Now, am I saying any of these Wi-Fi radios are super safe? No, but it's not COVID, and it's not killing us. It's just technology, and none of them would have gotten past that. It's no different than like drug tests, like drug testing and Pfizer's and all that stuff. They have to get past a set of animal trials, then human trials, and like if it doesn't muster and the side effects are way too much, then they don't put it on the market, right? And I know that drugs are a little bit more wider there, where we see like side effects include dying, and but 5G would not be put out. And remember what Russia's goal is to do, is their goal is to cause chaos, right? And they're capitalizing on fear right now, right? We want to distract ourselves to not think about this COVID stuff, so it's easy to go, oh my god, 5G, oh my gosh, like da-da-da, and go after that, right? And so I saw actually a scammer that was actually selling 5G repellent lotion, and I was like, I don't know if I hate him or not, right? Like, it was kind of clever, right? He made like $500,000 in it too, right? So it's like, it's all scammy, like it's,
So the part where I get held up, where a person like you can finish it, is why would what does Russia benefit from the chaos that makes them want to do this? Because right now there's so much memes and all this stuff going around. All these people are staring themselves up, chemtrails, this, that. What does it benefit Russia to do this?
Okay, so we got to go to the history of Russia and America for a little bit, right? So everybody remembers the Cold War, right? Well, not everybody might be alive for it, but we know about the Cold War. And this Cold War, in the 80s, when Gorbachev and the whole wall thing and blah, 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 we quote, made peace at the Cold War. Well, that was kind of a political lie. It was a political theater. What really has happened, it was a war of attrition, right? Who can afford to last the longest in this? And the Cold War is all about spies, right? It was essentially like, we're not going to nuke each other because we're afraid to do that and we all die, so it doesn't fit our mutual benefits, right? But we don't like each other, and we too are the most powerful countries in the world, and Russia's competitive and so is America, as you've seen, right? And so what's happened is, when the Cold War ended and we said, Russia, go to democracy, it's a great thing, we'll help you out even, right? Now, as you've seen, we're 250 years old country plus, and we're still figuring out how to make democracy work for ourselves, right? And so what's happened is that they sent a bunch of young people down in Russia the first year of this, and then kind of bounced out, right? Like, they didn't really help them or anything like this. And America has its flaws, like every other country, and so, and it wasn't like they did it on purpose. It was just oversight, and basically they kind of tricked Russia into the fact that going democracy makes America win. But what democracy did in Russia was put all the scientists and the computer scientists and the physicists and all that into breadlines. They were in breadlines, like literally starving for food. So then what's happened is the KGB of the old days becomes this corrupt mafia, right? So all these political powers, you've created a political power vacuum within Russia itself, where people, are literally needing work, and they work in unobjective sciences, like computer science and things like that. And then the KGB, for instance, is then putting pressure on, even 17-year-olds and shit to hack into the United States. This is actually why phishing originally was like a Russian thing with all the banks, right? And you would see in Russia sites that were like, in fraud we trust, and they'd have like these anti-Semitic, symbols and stuff. But essentially, they would also have their domain names that would say Lenin, Stalin, Gorbachev, all this stuff.ru, of these bad guy sites, on purpose, because they looked at as communism is better than what we're going on through right now, right? So there's a bit of like resentment that's actually carrying through here, and they see it as, you won this battle, but we will be back, right? And so right now, Putin comes along. And essentially, if we want to call it or not, he's a dictator, right? And so Putin comes along and he fixes the country, right? And the country's interests are oil, right? Oil and energy. That's the, if you look at every country as a company, that's their company product, right? Oil and energy. And Putin has a pretty strong, like, how do you say this publicly? Strong eye for getting back at us, right? And fixing this problem. And making Russia feel like they're the number one country again. So we are now in what people won't admit, but is a digital Cold War, right? So we're back in a Cold War. We're in a digital one, right? And so when we think about it, it first started with Russia getting into our banks and this and that, but like even in the early days, in early 2000s, I'd see them, they owned a bunch of government systems. They They like hacked into a lot of things and had access before a lot of people even knew about it, right? And they have been doing this art of social influence for a long time. It's something they actually designed in part of their what's called a PSYOPs, or psychological operations tradecraft, which is part of a sub component of spy tradecraft in general, right? And so their incentive is chaos for us because they don't want to wage a direct war with us because that's not a good idea. It's kind of like Asia is never going to do that either, right? You know, and we're just you'd have to go across Alaska to fight. It's going to be a thing. Like, so what they're doing is because they can do it digitally now, and it like information travels so fast, right? Because I remember in the '80s we had propaganda too, and spies dying of poison and umbrella tips and stuff like that. We still get that a little bit. There was a recent news about like 3 medical doctors that were working in Coronavirus just suddenly fell out the window this week in Russia, right? It's a very mafioso culture, right? Yeah. And I don't. But if you look at it empathetically, it's because they see it as we screwed them, right? So don't focus on the bad guy, good guy part. Just realize that they're protecting their national interests, and we're going to protect ours, right? And that's how you have to look at it from an unbiased look at is if we grew up in Russia, we probably agree with Russia, right? You know, so essentially they want to go back to, you know, they may not have communism or anything like that, but they, you know, controlled environment, which is what Putin's building, right? And he looks at America as kind of like fickle, dumb, and you know, this is what they're doing, right? Double check you can still hear me.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And so essentially what's, you know, sorry for the long story, but the history lesson has to be there. So essentially, you know, we're now, fast forward now, we're in a digital Cold War, and they're looking back at us. They have really figured out that we were exploitable because of the way we're not designed to handle all this information. We are fickle, we read headlines, we don't have time, you know, we got so much cognitive overload going on, and we are very opinionated. Right? And our political beliefs and our religious beliefs are all down to our parent model, or whether we want to piss them off or please them. It comes down to that, and that's why it's hard to like change them. Like you grab onto them because they're part of like what you grew up on, right? And so they are there to cause chaos, right? If we don't know that we're actually electing, you know, the president ourselves, even say they didn't actually act the election, but we feel like they did, right? Let's pretend that. That enough is causing doubt about our own just, you know, democracy, right? So they want to destroy our democracy. That is what they want to do because they're like, you know what, you gave us that crap. We're going to just destroy the thing that works for you guys, but we're going to show you why it doesn't work. And it's kind of a tongue-in-cheek, you know, thing, but it's become a military operation for them, right? Like they take it very seriously. They want to like flood us with information that we can't trust or even understand if we trust. I saw a recent one where you see, yeah. So
more chaos, though. I see it from young people that don't vote anyway. You know?
That's what they want. Because chaos, once you destroy that, guess what? They get control. Right? So you start with chaos, you overwhelm. This is actually called reflexive control technique, right? And it's part of what's called a STRATCOM technique, right? Strategic communications, but it's designed to affect your decision making. It's designed to literally flood it, and some of the techniques are literally flooding your decision making, right? And so when you do that, and you go, like my friend the other day, you changed his vote entirely, and he was, you know, making allegations about something that was not factual because of his fear, right? And I said, well, it either sounds Russian or it sounds like you're going through something, and he was going through something, but that's where it's exploitable, right? It's like, I need to protect. I got to pad my hen house. I got to make sure my family's safe. I got to do this. I do that. Well, fear in that time is huge, or hope. 2 biggest drugs in the world, fear and hope, right? Now, the worst part is what makes it intangible is that we do this here politically too. We slam politicians. We do the same techniques, but it's legal here. So we can't even tell what's coming from outside and inside. I mean, like, obviously the intelligence community can, but the people that are getting victim to it, they're just like, and the worst part about this is this: if it benefits one of the political parties, they're going to go with it. And that's the hardest part to deal with, is the fact that even though that's illegal and it should not be done, you know, it's not illegal enough because it's not tangible enough to do anything about it. And honestly, the politicians didn't know either. Like, like we'd like to say colluding and all this stuff, but let's just assume most of the politicians are like, that benefits us. Oh, I didn't even know that was illegal, right? Like it goes back to, I didn't know that was illegal, right? So, and that's the thing is this chaos will start, and then once they start doing it, and people make these decisions of like the black and white decisions, you're gonna have people in the corner that don't vote, people in the corner that furiously vote for like nationalism, and then you have mad people that are like look at even Democrats and Republicans. You don't even have to take a side. They're all acting kind of like so this way against each other. It used to be very much more like this and this, but it's literally fights. And that's not an accident, right? And when you do that, everybody's just going to go to the corner, and that leaves a pocket to control.
So yeah, man. I mean, I have these. I just try to educate people. Oh, that's another thing. You brought this up, and I don't know if it was in your first talk and it made it into your second, because I saw a few iterations of yours about how to fact check. Did you do something about that, right? Like about how to fact check?
So the 5 whys is a good one. Obviously, fact checking sources, double checking sources. Snopes is an entire thing that focuses snopes.com focuses on, is this true or not, right? And they go do fact checking themselves.
That, though. People are like, oh, Snopes, yeah, right, that's the left.
Exactly, and that's the problem right now. Is truth is this kind of weird hanging thing, right? And there's the 5 whys. That's why I'm like really highlighting, focusing on your emotions and why you're triggered in the first place. Because it's the best thing we can do right now when everything is confusing is ask ourselves, how do we react less? How do we understand that are we actually reacting mindfully? It's weird because it's almost like we have to use Buddhist practices to, to defend ourselves, but it really is, you got to kind of be still for a second and ask yourself, like, you kind of almost have to do self-therapy, right?
Right? Like, look at it from every angle and decide based on not just impulse. Yeah,
and it's hard because we're, like, again, we're cluttered with fear right now. We're getting mixed messages by the government anyways. And no matter what the president is, we're getting mixed messages. I'm not trying to side with anything, but it's just, we all know that there's just so much. Every state's doing their own way of doing it. Like, there's just, like, are we allowed to go outside? Are we not allowed to go outside? Like, there's that all is, kind of terrifying and confusing, right? And it works because what everybody's wishing in their mind? I wish we had a leader that could just tell us what to do. And do you see where that vacuum right there is? What if Russia takes it? Right? What if they figure out how to control a leader that just tells us what to do and we follow like sheep, right? And then the people that don't follow become anarchists and start waging wars, and maybe we get it, and not to scare anybody, but maybe it's a civil war again, like in a different way, like digitally, or just people fighting all the time. But that effectively works, and it's a worst case scenario is a civil war. I don't think we're even close to that, but that's like what's going on. Is this divide is just one phase of it, and the next is, let's find someone we can control, a puppet, this and that everybody will follow, that we also can control, right? And some people believe that's Trump now, right? But it might be something later down the line too. Do you know what I mean? So,
Sure. So, all right, we're on the last 10 minutes-ish. What do you think people in business right now should be looking at that correlates to any of this that you're talking about? Like anything for the entrepreneur right now, any advice?
Yeah. So AI is popping up. And I want to talk about that a little bit because AI is this kind of literal black box. Some people on the one end are very afraid of it, and some people are thinking it's going to solve everything. And it's essentially, a very powerful tool, and it's only getting better. It's Moore's law, where everything just kind of starts, going up and up and up. Like the original law was semiconductors, where the chips were this big, and then every 2 years it's going to be exponentially smaller, right? And the same with AI, the capabilities that we have. We're seeing that we can ask Siri fun questions, we can program things, and we're learning more and more and more. So I would tell it, whether you're in cybersecurity or not, or whether this and that as an entrepreneur, invest in AI, but understand it well, right? It can be a marketing buzz term that could also cause a massive ruin to the industry itself. So like we get that a lot, where an industry becomes too much of an industry, right? So like I've had to watch that grow, where it's like I started out as a hacker that just loved what he was doing, to now we're in this industry where it's just, when you look up, it's different, and it's got its pros and it's got its cons, and when money enters the arena and becomes a popular thing, like I think best way I looked at it is hackers have become like pro football players. Like they're popular, they're cool, like they're this and that, and we all probably make pretty good money right now. But AI is like a great investment. Another one is crypto, but don't get stuck on the blockchain thing. I want to be very careful that and what I mean by that is, one, the fad of it has already hit that peak, right? So people, if you're asking me, should I invest in Bitcoin? No, it's too late, right? You know what I mean? Like that part, like when I say invest in Bitcoin, I mean don't don't do the stock market investment, right? That fluctuation is actually quite dangerous at this point. What is a good investment is actually investing in tech people that actually understand these problems. So I see a lot of businesses and they want to apply blockchain to something, but they don't know what, because they hear the word blockchain, and that is the wrong approach. Same with, I want to apply AI to something, and that's the wrong approach. It's, what problem do I want to solve, and the money will come. So you look at, like, in security right now, I will be honest, I find the security industry a little bit boring. And the reason why is I don't feel like most people are just maintaining their appliance, maintaining their software that they have to maintain, that they've already put in there, and it helps you manage something, but is it really solving massive problems? For instance, can we get rid of passwords? Is that possible to do? Can we have it with, like, now the technology's there, but no one's investing in it right now because, there's all these other things that we can waste our time getting people, like, because in weird ways, security problems need to exist for us to exist. And there's an ethical dilemma there,
Right? Like, doesn't benefit them to solve.
Correct. It doesn't benefit. No different than like medicine doesn't. It benefits to treat, but not necessarily cure. And so that problem right now, as entrepreneurs, if you can find ways to actually solve real problems there, right? Big problems, something that's like no password. There's a free idea for you. But like essentially, if you can solve that and make it so that things are even more secure without passwords, because passwords are actually a big problem of getting hacked in the first place. I'll give you a hint, crypto. So once you do that, you can actually be the Uber of the next thing, or the Facebook of the next thing. But right now, innovation is kind of stifling in my industry. And I ask entrepreneurs to start looking closely. Don't apply blockchain to an idea you haven't come up with. Come up with an idea, and if it fits into that, and the blockchain will make it more efficient, awesome, right? Same with crypto, same with AI, right? Like, get there's so much that AI doesn't even need to solve yet, but AI is a great investment. So, like, for the non-entrepreneurs that need to, like, get in the industry, start learning data science. And for the investors there, start working with them to understand data science, so you're not just investing in bells and whistles or investing in terminology. And then that's what I would say. So,
Yeah, that's 100% right on. Like, I feel the same exact way. I believe it's going to be one of the greatest opportunities, but you have to understand it, even if you're not going to be a coder, right? Like, it's like, this thing can really transform the way you understand your industry, your business. So don't come at it, I'm not going to code, so whatever.
Right.
You understand it to be able to bring on people like you and even me to, like, help you, because people like us, we can tell you anything, and that's what's going to end up happening, right? It has to happen with your website, right? And imagine with AI, like, it's such a black box that people can tell you anything.
It's the ideas that come to you when you learn it that are important, not that you've just learned it and you want to throw it at something. It's that you have this idea that you're like, wait, we could, like, once you learn something, that's what the beautiful part. I learned something, and then I'm like, oh my God, did you know that we could apply it this way? And no one's thinking about that, right? And that's the key to a great innovation is thinking about that. So if you're not someone who has time to learn code, find someone who, if you're an investor, find someone who does know this stuff. Partner up with them, right? You're going to need that side. Like, it's almost like in VCs, we have a due diligence person that actually is a tech guy, right? And so you want to make sure you're partnering up with those kind of people and really understand the nitty gritty, right, of what's really going on there, so that it's not, I'm just investing in AI and that sounds cool, right? And it's an easy habit to get into. It sounds like that's the great investment. No, invest in a great idea, right? And it happens to run AI or happens to have blockchain,
I saw a stat that said 3% of artificial intelligence companies are actually using artificial intelligence.
Yep. Most people claim they're using AI and not using AI, right? Like, that's the funny part about it is, it's just a it's a buzzword now, right? And I'm like, that's not AI. That's not AI at all. And like, who cares? AI is just a tool, right? So solve a problem, money will come. So.
Great interview. If there's any, how can people find you? I know I put your website.
Sure.
But how can people find you? Is there anything you can use? Any help? Any type of people that maybe you're looking for that if somebody's watching here, they can reach out?
Yeah, sure. So I'm on Twitter at Lance J SSC, which is just SSC, I guess. And then I'm on Instagram at Lance James 221B. Lance James, just one full word. And if you want to email me, you can hit me up at lancejjames@unit221b, and you can find me easily on LinkedIn by just looking up Lance James. And the coolest picture of the Lance James is going to be the first one that you're going to get. So.
I think I used that one. So very nice catching up, man. It was awesome. We're definitely gonna catch up about the Meta Bronx stuff. And
oh yeah, I can't wait.
Doing that great work. Thank you for your time.
Hey, thank you, and thank you for having me. This was great. Hopefully, we do it again sometime. So.
All right. Everybody, check out this TED Talk too. I put the link on the bio. All right.
Awesome. All right. Thanks. All right. Bye.